All right, folks, welcome back. So last time when I was making this video, I continued on through annotating the rest of this piece, even though it turns out that the camera up there stopped working at about 30 minutes. But I continued on for another 10 minutes just through the original comprehension, which was a grand total of about 40 minutes on my comprehension. And I would say that for a dense text is not uncommon. Maybe it takes longer than that, maybe you get through it a little bit more quickly, but in general, that's about the ballpark that you're probably looking at if you really want to try and understand a piece particularly well. So, I'll just walk through some of the rest of what I had done. I think that my previous video ended right around here, I think. A discussion of to be in want of money is to be jostled by the rabble because you do not ride in your coach, or avoided by those who know your worth and shrink from it as a claim of their respect or their purse. So some of the things that I realized as I continued on past that, the rest of it is to be a burden to your relations or unable to do anything for them, to be ashamed to venture into crowds, and I think I had indicated why. That was kind of where the last one ended. To have cold comfort at home, to lose by degrees your confidence and any talent you might possess, to go crabbed, which is crabby, morose, which I looked up on the computer as gloomy, and querulous, which I thought meant interested in fighting, but it actually means to complain a lot. To be dissatisfied with everyone, but most so with yourself, and plagued out of your life, to look about for a place to die in, and quit the world without anyone's asking after your will, period. So a few things I noted at the end of the previous passage were, or since the last time I picked up the video, was there's a big shift here. So you'll notice that I made a big thick line here of sorts, and that's because I felt like there was a shift from the beginning when our writer is talking about what it's actually like to be poor at the beginning, and then at some point when I noted, oh, here was a funny part because you're behind a counter, or you're in a desk in a public office, or you're marrying your landlady, and then suddenly there's a lot of other kind of just normal jobs that he seems to be making fun of. Maybe there's some irony going on for sure, where he's not actually meaning what he's saying. Anyway, so I made another thick line up there. This is the part where he seems to be discussing something different than being dirt poor. And then at the bottom, I think he gets back to that dirt poor idea again. The other thing that I noted is that there's a period down here after the line, without anyone's asking after your will. And then I went back and I tried to figure out where else was there an end of a sentence. And I think it was at the very first sentence when he says, literally and truly, one cannot get on well in the world without money, period. And then this is one giant sentence. So syntactically, if I'm going to do a rhetorical analysis of this piece, I have to consider, why is there a giant sentence here? So maybe I'll just write that down. Why the giant sentence? At the end, he says, the wiseacres will possibly, however, crowd round your coffin and raise a monument at a considerable expense, and after a lapse of time, to commemorate your genius and your misfortune. And I looked up wiseacres just because the original writer italicized it, so that seems to be a really important word. Is a wisecracker, somebody who's pretending to be wise but isn't actually wise. But the author really wanted to emphasize that word wiseacres. And so again, pretend to be wise. I'm going to put why. Why the italics? Why is that important? It has to be a key to understanding this passage. And then other things I noted in this last line. However, they will crowd around your coffin, the wiseacres, the people who think they're wise but are really not. They're just pretending. They will possibly, however, crowd around your coffin and raise a monument at a considerable expense. He didn't have to say at a considerable expense, but he did. would suggest that these wiseacres are rich people. So the rich people will gather around your dead coffin, your dead body in your coffin, and they will raise a monument to you, of course after a lapse of time, not immediately. And they will commemorate your genius and your misfortune, your genius. So, they will bemoan how sad it is that you are gone, and your misfortune, how unfortunate of a life you had. I think the word misfortune is interesting because we typically mean it to mean your bad luck, but here misfortune quite literally might have something to do with missing out on the fortune of wealth. And so, I don't know, that just seemed like another important word. So that finished my comprehension stage of rhetorical analysis and immediately writing questions. And then you're thinking, wow, that was 40 minutes. What next? Is that it? Of course not. Even though it looks like there's lots of writing here, and I know some of you say, oh, Mr. Plotz just looks for lots of writing. You're right, I do, sort of. But your writing should really be focused on rhetorical analysis, on consideration of author's choices. What is the writer what are some author choices that seem important, and why did the writer do that? This is just about comprehension, which is important, but it's just the start, it's not the ending. So rhetorical analysis, if I'm doing a strong rhetorical analysis, I got to do these other things. I should number the paragraphs. I don't have paragraphs, I have lines, so I'm going to number my lines. Read or review any supporting information. Okay. William Hazlitt was a social commentator, a drama critic, and a philosopher. He was a thinker. He liked thinking. Okay. So William Hazlitt liked to think a lot, and his work is not really read very much, but he's considered one of the great critics and essayists of the English language. Okay, so a guy who's a philosopher and a critic and a thinker, what is he saying about the original prompt? Write an essay in which you analyze the rhetorical strategies Hazlitt uses to develop his position about money. So that's another thing. What does he think about money? That needs to be a question I'm asking myself as I'm going through this piece. What is his position on money? All right, before I forget, it's time to number these lines. So let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, my flashlight turned off. Just a second. There we go. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 25, 30, 34 lines. Okay, so there's 34 lines in this piece. Check. Done. Okay, number the paragraphs. I did my sort of comprehension. I didn't really summarize each paragraph because it's one giant paragraph. I should probably summarize the chunks though. So this first chunk, literally and truly, one cannot get on well with the world without money. To be in want of it is to pass through life with little credit or pleasure. Blah, blah, blah. Let's see. It is to live out the world, to be despised of it. It is not to be sent for in court or asked out to dinner, noticed in the street, not to have your opinion consulted or rejected with contempt, to have your acquirements, your knowledge carped at and doubted, your good things disparaged, and at last to lose the wit with the spirit to say them. It is to be scrutinized by strangers, neglected by friends. It is to be a thrall, a slave to your circumstances, as an exile in one's own country, to forego or to give up leisure, freedom, ease of body and mind, to be dependent on the goodwill and caprice whims of others, or to earn precarious, unstable, and irksome, annoying livelihood by some laborious employment. Okay, so the opening piece he's saying, it sucks to be poor. It's hard to be poor. What about being poor is hard? Well, your life is more difficult when you're poor. People don't care about you when you're poor. So when you're poor, people don't care what you think. They don't want to be with you. They act like you don't belong. And you live a physically difficult life. So when you're poor, others mistreat you, don't care about you, ignore you, or worse, ignore or mistreat you, and you have a physically difficult life, and you have physical toil. Okay. In the middle section here, though, this is different. In the middle here, he's saying something else. This is where he talks about people actually having a job, because early on my thinking was, oh, this is a person who has no job, but no, or very difficult, laborious employment. But now we've got to be compelled to stand behind a counter, to sit at a desk in some public office, or to marry your landlady or not the person you would wish. Of course people want to get married to the person that they want, but, you know, this is the single worst thing ever. Is that the same thing as being dirt poor? Probably not. Or to go out to the East or West Indies, or to get a situation as judge abroad and return home with a liver complaint. It's really hard to go on vacation and come back sick. Or to be a law stationer or a scrivener, which is a notary or a scavenger or a newspaper reporter. Or to read law and sit in court without a brief. I view that as being bored, or maybe it just means somebody who hangs out. I don't really get that. It has something to do with law. I'm not entirely sure what. Or to be deprived of the use of your fingers by transcribing Greek manuscripts, or to be a seal engraver and pour yourself blind. So again, here he's actually being funny. Here he's actually exaggerating the pains of a particular person's job. Or to try some of the fine arts. Or to go upon stage or try some of the fine arts with all your pains, anxiety, and hopes, and most probably to fail. Or if you succeed, after the exertions of years, and undergoing constant distress of mind and fortune, to be assailed on every side with envy, backbiting, and falsehood, or to be a favorite with the public for a while and then thrown into the background, or a jail by the fickleness of taste and some new favorite. To be full of enthusiasm, extravagance, and youth, of chagrin and disappointment in afterlife, your deep humiliation, to be jostled by the rabble because you do not ride in your coach. Okay, that's the end of that middle section here. So summary here, he's saying it's hard to have a boring middle to upper class life. But all of these to be's go back to be in want of it, to be in want of money, to not have enough money, to be lacking money, is to be all of these other things. So it's hard to have a boring middle to upper class life, because, and suggesting that that somehow is also, which is also being in want of money, which he really isn't suggesting, in want of money. But I'm just summarizing right now, trying to accurately represent what the language says. Literally, at least. Literally. Oh, literally. Okay. And then at the end, once again, he comes back to describing a number of different things that have to do with, if you are particularly poor, that your life is very difficult once again. It's not just about mistreatment at this point. It's that you are a burden to other people. You can't do anything. You feel ashamed. You aren't really comfortable at home. So earlier it was sort of about how other people treat you. Down here, regarding the difficulties of being poor, it seems more about personal issues that you may have. So this is about, what should we call this? No, not under the wiseacres. The wiseacre line is something else entirely. That's probably another new chunk. Alright, so here, to really be unhappy, I think. Unhappy because of your mistreatment, and because people don't treat you well, and because it's very difficult to actually not have enough money to do certain things. You can't do what you want to do. Home is terrible. You're crabby. You're gloomy. And okay, so poor equals difficult. I don't really know what else to say. Poor equals difficult for its effects. Personal effects. There are personal things that make life difficult. Okay. And then the ending. The wiseacres will possibly, however, crowd around your coffin and raise a monument at a considerable expense and after a lapse of time to commemorate your genius and your misfortune. So what is that last line saying? Wiseacres, people who think they're smart, probably a bunch of rich people because they've got the considerable expense that they're raising a monument to. So rich, snobby people. This last chunk is maybe saying like rich, snobby people. They will talk about how difficult your life was, and they will say that you were a genius, but that there was this great misfortune as well. But they don't do squat for you while you're alive. So that seems important here. So rich, snobby people will be what? Hypocritical? I don't know if hypocritical is the right word. It's not like they've said one thing and done something else. Well, sort of. Will be unhelpful. Will try to take claim. They're going to try and make this about you. Make your death about them. Be attention seeking. Maybe hypocritical. I'm not sure that's the right word. I'm going to put it down for now. Hypocritical and attention seeking. About your death. Okay. So let's see how we did. Numbered. Unknown words. Looked them up right away. Wrote down some questions. Wrote down a few comments. Summarized each chunk based on my initial reading. Write a short summary of what the text explicitly says. And I told you not to keep the words short there. Okay, so overall, what is he saying? He's saying it's very difficult if you're actually poor because people don't treat you well. They don't care about what you think. You stop being able to say things. Your friends neglect you. You're a slave to your circumstances. But then he compares that to middle and upper class life, saying, oh man, it's really difficult to be a writer, even though he's a writer. It's really difficult to be famous because, oh my gosh, it's tough to be a celebrity. And then he finishes by talking about how it's actually difficult to be poor again in your life. And that the rich, snobby people are going to be hypocritical and attention-seeking once one of these poor people dies and says, oh, what a genius, but oh, how sad. Okay. I feel like I'm getting a better sense of maybe what he's doing here. But I'm still not positive. Alright. Now I'm going to reread this a couple more times. Structurally, I have broken it into chunks. Decide why I've divided it in each spot, because I think he switches main idea. Why does he include the first chunk and the second chunk, and so on? What seems to be the function of that chunk? Alright. Got a new pen here, got my red pen. Okay. What's the purpose of this first chunk? Literally and truly, one cannot get on well in the world without money. Well, the first thing that I would say I notice, structurally, I do this, something that needs to be addressed at some point though is surface rhetorical devices. Something about the syntax has to be addressed, about the fact that he's got one giant sentence in the middle. Yeah, okay. But I should do the structure thing. Let's do the structure thing. Although you address the things that you recognize, address the things that you understand when you're doing a rhetorical analysis. Not everything has to be addressed, just the things that seem really important. So tone is important here. I'm still not entirely sure what his tone is. It's definitely not a straightforward tone throughout the whole thing. This is a different tone. I think he's being ironic here. I think his tone is critical. I think he's very critical of people who complain about their jobs and their lives as though they're really difficult, when it's really not anything like what it actually means to be poor. And again, I want to come back to his prompt. Write an essay in which you analyze the rhetorical strategies Hazlitt uses to develop his position about money. Okay, so why does he have this first chunk where he talks about what it's actually like to be poor? I think he has it in here to set up how difficult poor life is. And then he's going to contrast that. He's contrasting, so it shows poverty, which we already sort of summarized. It shows real poverty. Real poverty. And then he's got this middle chunk here. I suspect that his audience is probably these people. If you're poor, you don't need somebody to write an essay telling you, here's how difficult your life is when you're poor. If you're middle class or upper class, you maybe don't realize what it's like to be poor. And so he opens up talking about, here's what real poverty is like. And then he gets to his audience where he's now, he's comparing real poverty to, I imagine this is what he hears people saying. He's like, oh man, it's so difficult to go on vacation and get sick, or to have at my job. It's really, like I don't make enough money. These are maybe all people that gripe about how much money they make, thinking they don't have enough money. But especially when we get down to the fine arts people, I imagine that these are reasonably wealthier people, but maybe like they still don't think that they ever have enough money, and it's really difficult to have the amount of money that they have. Okay, so he's comparing real poverty to complainers who have money, who have some money. All right, he's comparing real poverty to complainers. And why? What does he want? He wants these complainers to realize, he wants them to realize the ridiculousness of their complaints. And that they're not actually poor. He finishes with this business about what it's actually like to be poor again. Probably to remind about the opening. To remind about actual poverty. This is what it's really like. This is what it's really like. You people don't have it this bad or this bad. You people are doing just fine, so quit your complaining. And you richer people, which is maybe some of these people up here anyway, I don't really know socioeconomically where you were at, if you were a paper reporter or a notary or a law stationer or a transcriber or a seal engraver. But then to have people sit around and talk about, way after the fact, oh, how great this person was who's now dead, is just ridiculous. You're not helping any poor people. This is not the time to help somebody when they're poor, is to spend a lot of money on them. The time to help somebody when they're poor is when they're flipping alive still. So that seems to be really important. He's trying to say, you're wasting your money on people after they're dead. rich people are wasting their money on people after they're dead instead of helping them while they're alive. If they really had such genius, why didn't they get helped with some amount of monetary compensation while they were still alive? So waste money on people after they're dead instead of helping when they're alive. Okay. So if that's the function of this chunk, if that's what he's trying to say, I feel like this is probably getting pretty close to his actual purpose. But we got to come back to the prompt. Develop his position about money. What is he saying about money? Well, he seems to be saying a few things about money. He seems to be saying something about what is it like to be actually poor versus what is it like to be middle class and think you don't have enough money. Wait, on the want of money. Maybe these people don't even complain about not having enough money. Maybe they just have no idea what it's like to really be poor. And maybe that's what he's saying. He's trying to say, look, here's what poor really looks like. And if that's the case, you people who've got money should be a little bit more charitable and should give these poor people some of your money instead of being extravagant in your youth and complaining about people not liking you enough anymore versus when you were a bigger celebrity. And acknowledge that like you've got a job and like you're doing fine. So his position about money. It's actually difficult to be poor. Something about true poverty. True poverty is incredibly difficult. Is such a lame word. I feel like I need a better word, but for now I'll just say difficult. True poverty is extremely difficult. Partly it's extremely difficult because all of the other people treat you so poorly. Extremely difficult in part because society mistreats the impoverished. The people who are poor. Okay, so true poverty is extremely difficult, in part because society mistreats the impoverished, and then, but there's got to be, so that kind of addresses this, it kind of addresses this, kind of addresses the bottom. What about this middle section? What do I say about his position on money as it relates to these people? The rest of society has it really good, and they just, their complaints are so minimal in comparison to real poverty. True poverty is extremely difficult, in part because society mistreats the impoverished. The rest of society has no legitimate complaints by comparison. Okay. So if that's his position, if I think that that's his position about money, what rhetorical strategies does he use to achieve this? So one of the big things that is noticed is this giant sentence. Why would he have everything in a giant sentence? Maybe he has everything in a giant sentence so that, what's the effect of this? Well, I feel like my brain never really got a break as I was reading that. It was really intense. And maybe some of you felt the same way. So maybe he's got this giant sentence regarding syntax here, answering the question of giant sentence. Syntactically, you don't get a break. You don't get a break when you're impoverished because of all of this other stuff and the way that other people treat you. And similarly, we didn't get a break in the middle of this. So syntax, maybe he's trying to not give the syntax, not syntax, the one long sentence, the giant sentence. Long is an understatement here. The effect of the long sentence is to not give the reader a break. Just like poverty never gives a break to the impoverished. That's really intense. If he's trying to lay on thick, here's this unending list of issues regarding actually being impoverished, and then these two. So that's at least one function of this long sentence. I think he puts this middle section, but see, that would make sense if he put a period here after laborious employment, and then if he had this next part be its own sentence. But maybe in the middle here, maybe the reason why he loaded all this stuff in there is to show the false equivocation. Equivocation means you make something equivalent or equal, and a false equivocation is pretending that something is equal when it's really not. Is to highlight the false equivocation of the middle class and the upper class. I think that's what's going on with his long sentence. Okay. How else does he... What other things did I notice in here? So other things that I noticed were... Let's see, what else should I be looking for? I should be looking for things like diction. Well, I know there are a lot of words that I looked up at the beginning. And I know I'm supposed to look for appeals too. Usually I sort of do that as I go, maybe later. I noticed there was a lot of really strong diction in the beginning. And when I say strong negative diction, really harsh language. There's some very harsh language at the beginning. Is that throughout, or where does it stop? Let's see. To be despised. So despised is a very strong word here. If you are despised, it's not just that people dislike you, they despise you. To not have your opinion consulted or rejected with contempt. Deep, intense scorn. Carped at. To be carped at. Oh, what a beautiful word, carped. Having your good things disparaged. To lose your spirit and to lose your wit. To a guy who's a social commentator and philosopher, losing his wit is probably a big thing, especially since he's kind of witty throughout much of this middle section. To be scrutinized, to be neglected, in thrall, a slave, an exile. To have to forego all of these good things. Precarious and irksome and laborious. Okay, so there's lots of strong negative language in the actual real poverty part. It is to be compelled to stand behind a counter or to sit at a desk in some public office or to marry your landlady or not the person you would wish or to go out to the East or West Indies or to get a situation as judge abroad and return home with a liver complaint or be a law stationer or a script. Okay. So one thing that's other than, to be deprived of the use of your fingers by transcribing, but he's exaggerating what that would actually be like. To make yourself go blind as a seal engraver, again, he's exaggerating there. Your pain, your exertions of years, constant distress of being successful. And being assailed on every side with envy and backbiting and falsehood. Okay, so initially, the harsh language early paints an actually legitimate negative picture of being in poverty. The middle section he stops with that harsh language here. And he has to stop to help a reader realize this is not that. This life of a middle-class person is not the life of an impoverished person. So there's a lack of strong, harsh language to highlight that idea. And eventually when he brings it back, depriving yourself of your fingers by transcribing Greek manuscripts, pouring yourself blind, the constant distress of being successful in the fine arts or on the stage and being assailed and all that, that is, he's doing this to make fun of the fact that this is nothing like it is to actually be impoverished. Let's see, what else is there? Chagrin, disappointment. Disappointment is even not nearly so bad as being disparaged. To be jostled by the rabble. I think that word rabble is in there because he's saying these are the poor people that you view as rabble. Okay. To be avoided by those who know your worth and shrink from it as claim on their respect or their purse. To be a burden to your relations. You are unable to do anything for them. To be ashamed. Cold comfort, lack of comfort. To lose by degrees your confidence or any talent. You are losing any talent. To go crabbed, morose, querulous, dissatisfied, play. Yeah, so the ending of the rich person here. So here's another thing that I'm seeing. So there's a lot of comparisons as well. There's a lot of contrasts. One strategy he's using is contrasts. He's got contrasting language, contrasting diction, the imagery that's in here. So there's lots of images about a generally impoverished person, and what it's like for those types of people. And then these are all specific, tied to specific industries, tied to specific jobs. So there's a contrast in diction, there's a contrast in imagery too. He goes from life imagery, difficult life imagery, and difficult life descriptions to specific jobs. And if you have a specific job, then you're not impoverished and you don't really know what it's like unless you were one of those people. And then he goes back to that down at the end, and then he calls them wiseacres. Okay. What else? What else? Wiseacres. You've got to know wiseacres. Why does he italicize it? To really highlight his idea that, in case you missed it, that if you do this thing, if you're the ones building that monument, you are being wasteful. You should not do that. That is the wrong thing. You think you're being wise, but you're not being wise. You should just help these people. That's why he italicizes that word. Because if you miss that, then you might miss the whole point of the piece. Okay, appeals. Well, he's appealing to your sympathy. If you wanted to talk about appeals, I don't know that appeal is super important to talk about. I mean, I might talk about just the negative emotions and the harshness of the language and the effect that that has in helping a reader, an audience, truly recognize the depths of depravity that society views and treats you if you're impoverished. And then down here as well, the same. So it is an appeal to an emotion of sympathy, perhaps. And I think that's all I have time for right now because I don't want the camera to cut out on me. I'd probably, if it were for class, I'd probably continue doing more annotations, but for now I think I'm going to call it quits because I've now spent a little over an hour on this and I've got some other things I need to do this weekend. Hopefully this has been useful to you in understanding what it is that I might go through on a brand new text that I had never previously read to try to better understand what's in it.